you can start in workshop mode, which is just go through the agenda and discuss things. You just can't take any official action
Okay.
until you have a form.
Is the icebreaker official action?
No.
Okay, so long as it's mentee, I just, to get us started, I just did a summer theme, where would you like to travel? I thought that would be fun. We could, and then, our agenda today is to review, the last 3 topics we discussed. You know, I kind of coalesced our discussion points, what we discussed, and I have them included in the minutes, which I shared last week. And then our new topic for today is data security, where we would get into what we would like to see for recommendations of like how we protect information. So, but yeah, simple link this morning to jump into the mentee, and then this is just kind of get in there to make sure people are getting that. Lauren, if you, I know we had done this the last time. I'm hoping you got the link I sent you, but basically this is just a way to kind of for us to all kind of express how we feel about the discussion topic, so everybody's heard. If you have any trouble, let me know. Oh, it's all coming up. Once I go trip of South America. Great. South Africa. Europe. Looks like everyone in got it. But I couldn't get you next part. Oh, you can get it. Yeah, it's not the maps. Yeah, this is just an image.
Yeah, go to the coldest place.
Yeah. So what do we do now, Bob?
Why don't you just go through the agenda? You just can't take any votes. I mean, you know, you discuss anything that needs to be discussed. You
Okay.
can, you know, just and keep notes. So at the next meeting, you can go over what was discussed before, and if you happen to gain a quorum during the meeting, you can, you know, then take action.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, Bonnie? I know we're proceeding through this, but I felt like we haven't come to definitive decisions in any of these meetings necessarily as we push forward. Am I missing something?
Well, I mean, if you look at the minutes, how I've sort of been operating is, like you'll look at the recap, we talked about what data is collected. Advance to the screen where I have the layout of all our meetings. So we talked about data collection in April. We talked about what data is collected, how data is collected, and then in the last meeting, the May meeting, you know, we talked about and validated. Okay, is this what everybody likes? And we did the thumbs up, thumbs down. Everybody approved that as sort of what language we'd want to see in the policy. So from what this past year, it was what I would actually use to populate our policy at the end. So, and then, you know, upon the minutes being approved, that's sort of like almost a third thumbs up for these being included. So the how data is collected and the what data is collected would sort of be included as part of the policy. And then for this time, during our May meeting, our new topics were informing participants, required data and data sharing. So those were topics we discussed during the last meeting. So in this meeting, we sort of be like, okay, this is what I heard. Is everybody okay with the language that we have?
Yeah, and it wasn't particular, and I think, our colleague here from the university kind of echoed something, or a concern I had.
Okay.
And I tried to put this in some notes in the feedback that we get the surveys. Using data, you need to collect it upfront, catching data in the midpoint, you've missed everybody that's been through and everything like that. So I appreciate, even while the trust has been running for a while, it's recognizing, you know, this is the foundation for really having great data moving forward. Lee made the comment that we need to have a bunch of data so we can, monitor kids through time. I don't have a issue so much with that as it, when it comes to security, I have a huge issue that we aren't, certainly demonstrating or sharing data out unnecessarily if it's got personal data. But, working in programs, the one thing I know is we may have that very expensive program that's super intense with the kids. They serve only 5 kids a year, but 4 of those 5 kids never again do we see in the juvenile justice system and the like. And we can't gauge success. There's no equivalent gauge for success that goes broadly across programs. So when we collect data, we really have to almost have the assessment of what is success defined within these contracts that we are letting out, which it may well be, but this is, I'm coming into this midstream, I admit, on this committee, but because we, in my work with Boys and Girls Club and then some other organizations, essentially, that is defined at the front, what we are going to gauge as success, and we should, and then essentially, it is nice to know if there are continuations with this child as they move forward. But I couldn't, it almost felt like we were going to work towards some sort of single gauge as to success. And that's what I want to make sure we are not moving towards.
No, I agree. And I think we talked about that in that what data is collected. We would try to collect characteristics of the program or program participants that make sense, the benefits and effectiveness that would be based on, what the program is looking to achieve in that specific program model.
Yeah, because I think we can essentially come to an agreement that, but thinking in terms of small, medium, large, extra large is our graduate, super successful, comes back and mentors their peers and everything like that. Whereas I like the fact that a program might have attractiveness and start to engage a kid, but I don't want it to be a failure if that child's family moves out of the range of them being able to continue participating. So I don't know if we've talked at all perhaps of reasons for withdrawal. If I have to look at attrition data constantly when I look at DCF employees, and we do try to categorize because some people, it's not their fault. Their mom got sick, they have to stay home, they have to leave their work, their husband got sick, they're leaving the workforce. Has nothing to do with DCF as an employer. It is their personal situation versus they had a horrible supervisor and they had to just get away from them. So I'm not sure if that's kind of captured in there. As I reflect on these things after the fact, a lot of it kind of.
Yeah, and that's if you look at the meeting notes from the May 26th, we talked about amount and duration of services, which might somewhat speak to attrition, like if somebody, how much service is being received, how long it was received for. benefits and effectiveness of funded services is also another one, but it doesn't specifically call out, attrition or engagement or things of any level.
Yeah, and I think, and sitting on the side, trying to sit on both sides of the equation. One is a citizen wanting to have very good information, and also on the side of the organizations that are fortunate enough to be funded and provide these very important services where we can afford even those easy, one of these four categories, they essentially fit in small, medium, or large, extra large participation, or reasons for them leaving. And it may be, you may get others, but there may be trends in data that we can find if we indeed start building those labels for them. And I have never looked at a trust contract before to determine what we're setting out in there. And I don't know if it's been lesser, and the whole objective of this particular activity is not just to have a policy for the trust, but in it to feed in its contract.
Yeah, and in each of our contracts, we use the results-based accountability framework. We define kind of how much is the quantity of services that are received, and how well that might be a measure of completion rate or the dosage of service or satisfaction. And then the better off aspect of it would be impact or outcomes. And it would be different based on the program. I mean, they're really.
So it is
well,
tailored,
that
it is
much-
tailored by program that the
Yeah.
contract's written for.
Yes. It doesn't make sense to have the same measures across various programs.
But again, even if we feel so, the one that's once a week or residential, let's say we had a residential program, which not saying that this is funding that, but where somebody's there every single day or has a requirement to check in every day, and then something that might happen by monthly. The kid that that's there, 90% of the time is extra large participation, just as the child is there 2 times a month, which is the maximum that they can achieve. I guess I'm trying to figure out how data is synthesized after it all comes back in.
Yeah, and it would be a program or maybe a system level, but different programs that are focused on very different outcomes and strategies would probably be looked at in different manner. So I hope that
That helps, thank you.
yeah, that how much and how well those might be pretty consistent, because I try to have it be consistent and fair across the programs, and that it would look at a similar concept, but it might be measured in a different way. So that was for we now have a forum, so I guess we can
We're so happy to see you.
yeah, we are very happy. Thank you.
Maybe I'm trying to work. So, I'm gonna get over here by.
Thank you for coming. I guess we can approve or take a vote to approve the minutes. We don't have it there, so I guess I will.
So,
I guess all in favor,
All right.
any opposed? And I went over briefly our agenda, so this is the slide where we look at where we've been and where we're going. I spent the last 2 meetings talking about the data collection, the recap of our last 2 topics. We'll get into more where you guys can let me know what if I feel like I've done a good job in summarizing what we spoke about, if this is okay. For what you'd like to see in our policy, in the trust policy in terms of informing participants. This was in the minutes, but basically to summarize, it's providers that would be collecting personally identified information from children and families who would obtain consent. And that would be from a person legally authorized to give consent. So if it's a minor child, that would be their parent. And then they would sign off on a short consent statement that would include the following components: why the information is being collected, how it will be used, and how it will be protected. So that was something that we had some discussion about, if we wanted to elaborate to folks that, to families, parents, people that are participating in programs, that about why the information is being collected, how it will be used, but want to have it be concise and also something that isn't like a huge, like difficult, incomprehensible document that is extra, something that maybe could be embedded into another form that providers are already using, but do want to express to the participants that the information is being provided to the trust and why that is happening and how in the manner in which that will occur. So that is that's that piece. And that the one thing that I added that we didn't discuss, but I thought it would be good, is that and that was always my thought, that the intent would be to make sure our full data collection policy is available on the web. There is a little web landing page that I linked to for our committee, and actually all your names are on there too. There was you guys as our committee members, but my thought at the end of it, this would be that here's the website up on the screen over there. So we have a little page on our website, and that we could end up posting it somewhere where everybody could see it. We could even list my name, or if people had a grievance or an issue with data collection, that they would know who to contact, and that would be available for that. But then at the end of us doing this policy, or maybe it would go somewhere else that's up for grabs, but that it would be somewhere where you guys, they could even say for more information, they could read more information, like details on demand, but like just the basic synopsis, like on our form. So that was my thought for that. So we thought that would be also something for that. Yeah.
Just a question, does this committee dissolve after the last meeting?
After we present to the board and they approve the policy would be approved, the committee would be, that's what you signed up for, is the succession. And then, obviously I welcome and encourage you to come to the board meeting when we present.
But the committee ceases.
Yes, and the committee would end at that point. There, there will probably always be committee opportunities, and so, yeah, that would be something, unless there's a specific task that we want to get more community input on regarding the policies and how we, obviously that's so I don't think everybody gave their input on this. Was there anybody who had any issues with the informing participants, what we're putting forward for that, or is this good? Good to go? Or okay, good. So required data, we also talked about what type of information would be required, and by because we are a public funder, there's certain data elements that are required for accountability purposes. So that information would be required. There's not an opt-out option for that. Additional data elements for evaluation, on a provider level, the providers would need to conduct it. They would have to say, okay, Taylor, you're a part of my, you're a part of my program. This is a survey. Please give us your feedback. The Taylor could say, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't have time to do that. You're a human being. You have free will. You refuse to do it. At a certain point, though, we would want to see if there's a lot of families saying, no, I don't want to give my feedback. I don't want to do that. Then we want to look at, well, what way can we capture the impact of the program? So at that point, would be an area where we want to improve that, because we want to know that the programs are making an impact. And so we want to see that, definitely at the provider level, if they're administering whatever data collection process to ascertain the outcomes of the programs, but as the participants, we can force somebody to be a part of a data collection process. And then particularly the more involved processes like focus groups or interviews, like that's all great information, we want to hear from families. And then, consent to release, personally identified information, for, like, say, if we wanted to look at additional outcomes outside of that, those would all be things that wouldn't be required at a participant level. And then, so these were all things that we discussed during the last meeting. If there's anything I missed or got wrong, or if you want to further get into on this one, otherwise, give your thumbs up or thumbs down. So we can,
Can I clarify,
yes.
one of the things I know we were talking about with required data, maybe this is just worded differently. People don't have to agree to have this data information collected to receive the services. Is that right? Or is it, are we saying that it's tied in that you want the services, you have to get this accountability data?
The accountability data, yes, they can opt out of that. If they want the service and we're paying for that person to be served, we need to see, that we're served, to be able to verify services were received for a person and that their information is.
And that means the personal identifiable information goes to the Children's Trust.
Yeah, we would need to see that with the person.
So they have to share that in order to get. the
Yeah, they don't, and, it would be limited based on the type of service. Otherwise, unless it was a service that we, there was a law that prevented us to see, like if it was health information,
Well,
you don't have the proper legal.
Like
authority
filling
to
out
see that.
a sheet, whether there's a Google sheet, whether there's an IEP, if the kid has an IEP or not. That would be health related data, I think. But I'm just saying that, I'm just clarifying that they would have to do that. And is there some, are we coding them now so the kids will have a number? So we can tell people that, because I'm still not real comfortable about these Google sheets and.
Yeah, and this is part of it that we're getting into for the data security that, when we, back to, our how that we talked about in the April meeting, and the how, and that's on page 2 of the meeting notes, we said personally identified information requested by the trust on children and families who enroll, participate, or receive services will be collected via a secure data system where all individuals have a unique identifier on which providers would receive training, and then there will be a consent process for that. So that's what we talked
And is that
about.
happening now?
We're in the exploration process.
So the sheets that are being turned in right now,
They don't have any personally identified information.
okay, so no,
So, right, but upon this policy being approved, then all future personally identified will be collected. So through a secure system, we might, if we have a program that, has unidentified information or other information, we could maybe still use Google Sheets for a quick way to do something, but it wouldn't contain, a specific person. They would have first, last, name, date of birth.
okay. So no personal identifiable information will be
On Google.
on Google
It'll be
Sheets
that
until this is all secured up, so we don't have a loose system like we have. Okay. Thank you.
I want to go back to this because I'm honestly struggling with this idea of no opt-out. And I think what I'm struggling with is asking myself the 3 questions I think I shared last time, which is, what are the benefits of having a no opt-out policy? What are potential risks, and who is most harmed by this? It's like I'm thinking of can we name the individuals and people who, if we have a no opt-out policy, would potentially drive them away from getting the service in the first place? And how to, I'm a data guy and I very much understand the purposes and I think the benefits behind accountability. But I think that's the part I'm struggling with, is who loses when we have a no opt-out policy, for if we don't collect the data, they don't get the services they need, want to help them.
If I may, Medicaid's an analog, okay? If you want the service, you have to give up certain data. This is a public funded data. So the public funded service, so in order, you have to, whatever the data that you need to verify services were delivered to leave an audit trail. That's a non-negotiable.
That's
Now,
why I don't have the.
that's going to vary, that may vary from contract to contract. But just like Medicaid, Medicare, you know, there's a trade-off. If you want the service, you want the funds, you have to agree to give certain information. Charities may be able to say, we don't need that. We have to be subject to a government audit every year, which means we have to be able to track that the funds were spent the way that the state requires it to be spent. So you have to have a way to track the funding.
My analogy was I can't go to school and get an education unless I can obtain direct, right? If you're gonna say that I'm not eligible to get an Alachua County education because I don't live in Alachua County. Then that was my thought. So the thought would be that if somebody opted out, they can find someone else to pay for it. But I mean, I get it and I want, but at the same point, it's a county program paying the taxpayer funding, have to get there. You have to at least verify that they're eligible for that.
I think both of those analogies, no, I appreciate both of those analogies. I think both for the audit trail, but like I think of like the with drawn out scale of that is like, well, we're spending money and we don't know who or where it's going to. I can see how that might be a challenge. I think that also makes sense. I think what all three of the scenarios of what we're talking about Medicaid, the school have in common is still like, I think it is still an important question to understand who is in that overlap and who's being marginalized in that system. So like in all three systems, who are the people that like don't want to give their information because they're afraid of being deported, they're afraid of retribution from whoever, right? Like, I still think that's a really important question to know and name if we have that policy, and that'd be terrific for all three organizations or systems. But that's all I want to share.
I get that. I mean, I believe in that too. That's what I hope that if somebody was going to do it, then they refer to, maybe something like a church or some sort of private organization that might help.
Well, there's also, rare would it be that a nonprofit that's serving youth would have the Children's Trust as the only source of funding. So, like with one of our kids, if someone didn't provide that and chose not to, we have other funds that we can support that child. So, I think in theory it's a good thing to always talk about, are we going by our policies, are we going to further marginalize families and all and not provide what they need? However, I think in most situations, we would, in our case, we'd find another way to support that child.
It would be good to get data on that, like to get data on the number of people who refuse to use the program because of the opt-out, and that way reevaluate.
I think that's something that we could potentially communicate with providers to inform us of when something like that is happening. But also one thing we talked about is communicating with providers and families and ensuring them that those marginalized populations will be shared with the organization that could let this in their lives.
Yeah, it's common also in trade to do much, right? When it gets to high school age, there are a lot of young people who don't want to identify in a category. Yes, they need those services, right? But or let's say those services should be made available to them. They don't because of the state associated. They think so I think you're absolutely right. It's the data that needs to be collected, but I think it's really amazing that you're doing. So if we have 50 students in the program, 40 of them are through children's trust and 10 are not, why the 10 not? If it, what, I guess eventually the question is, why are those? And you can't really ask those questions, you just know that 10 are not, because you want to be very, very careful about what you say.
Lauren, I wanted to check in with you. Are you hearing us okay? Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Hi, I'm hearing you okay. I did want to, I put this on the online commenting, but the only, sorry, what?
I'll switch over to that slide too, because I did that. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, so yeah, my comment there was just about the 70% of eligible participants. Like a program like ours who has a lot of participants who we provide services to maybe once, or we have participants who we provide ongoing services to, just how to define which ones. I mean, I assume that all of them would be considered eligible participants, but I don't think the data quality would be the same for someone who we provide a service to on one occasion than to people who we work with very frequently. And so for all of them to be lumped into the 70% of participants would be, I don't know, like some of them I could see us not really having data on, other than like we provided this service to them, but not necessarily the follow-up, because we have people who come in and then they change their phone number, or they are hard to get to come back in. They're hard to stay in contact with. So we don't want to not provide that service to them just because we don't know that they're going to be going through something from then on, that would make them not follow up with us. But it would be hard to get data from them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and this is also brought up, like, what who's included in that 70% too, and I think how I brought it up, or how I was thinking when I put up the 70% out there, it would be the ones that would be eligible for whatever assessment or whatever, they say the people that were actually handed or emailed a survey, like how many of those folks, and it would be the ones that would be ready, that hadn't dropped off at an earlier point. But we would work and look with the program on what that eligible population was, because like you said, Taylor gave the example during that last meeting of, what if we do a survey with the whole student, we want to do it with the whole student body, but maybe only 90% of the student body is present on said day, and be like, well, not really not the ones that were present or had an opportunity to do the whatever data collection process was being done. So yeah, we would want to work with you, but we want to, I think that the point of the 70% is to get a representative sample that we feel like, we're getting a good amount of the people that, would represent the whole of the program, and to speak of how the program's operating, what benefits it's having for people. Is there any, is putting more clarity around that, is that what you're looking for, or how you're suggesting to improve that?
I'm not really sure how to improve it, honestly. I'm just thinking of, like, there are parents who I work with who come in because they want to like apply for WIC or something like that. And then maybe that's the only time I see them, because then after that I try to get in contact with them and they're too busy or they're going through something, and so then they can't come back in. And I'm thinking, well, would I necessarily want to give them a survey, and what would that survey even look like compared to other people?
Okay, so like you're thinking there needs to be like a certain minimum dosage of service, specific to certain services or certain surveys. Like I think with your contract too, I think we had some surveys that we specified for your contracts that are outcomes, and we were like, okay, let's only do it after they've received 3 sessions or something.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah, I think a minimum service would be helpful because if we looked at eligible participants that anyone who we had any contact with or provided any service for, then it would be tricky. Like, I just don't think the data would be very good quality if we were doing a follow-up with someone who we saw once, then we really wouldn't have made that much of a difference potentially because we only saw them once compared to someone who we've worked with for like 6 months. That would be a very different quality data, so they wouldn't necessarily be the same representation.
So does this still need some revision or how could, I mean, I don't think that first bullet is negotiable. We do try to fund programs that if they do want to opt out, that we could, that, you know, we have our certain how much number we'll want to see, maybe 50 youth are served or maybe 50. But if you guys serve extra of that, those, you know, and you're able to do that, certainly that information, if that person opts out, they could be one of the 50 that you don't include. But as far as, you know, if we're paying for a certain number of services for people to be served, then those ones we would want to have validation on. So I don't, if there's additional language or something that would have us kind of come to a consensus on this, I'm willing to add some of the discussion points. If you guys would help put some of those into this, that would be helpful for me to know exactly the specifics of what you're thinking regarding what Taylor shared and some of what you shared as well. Or even kind of some of the suggestions, Christy, or go ahead.
Let's share a couple of things related to the data required to collect. I think that you've already articulated that you're going to share with participants why you're collecting the data and how you're going to use the data. And so the concerns that you raised about, well, am I going to try to share it just bring they fear that we can use it for deportation or something like that. You would then be in violation of your own policies if you were to actually use the data for any purpose other than what you told parents you would use it for. And so I think that it would be important for the trust to make it clear these are the only reasons we're going to use your name when we're asking for your name, period. And you might even go so far as to outline for them what their recourse would be if there's any event where the data were used for a purpose that wasn't outlined and how you would use the service and ask for that permission to increase their confidence. But you can't deliver services and not know who you're giving services to. So if somebody's really afraid of giving their name, which people write their names down to attend meetings. So I mean, I really don't think that for most families that's going to be an issue. Other information potentially, if you're talking about more personal circumstances and things that are going on, but that would only be relevant to determine eligibility for services. And so I think the risk reward on that is probably very minimal for the data you would actually require to identify that individuals are receiving services. The other comments related to the response rate. Typically, customer service surveys with a response rate of 50% is considered excellent. Commonly, your response rates are going to be between 5 and 30%. Establishing a minimum threshold of 70%, I think, is setting yourself up for failure to motivate folks to collecting these data. So I think that it may be better to talk about a lower, and then if you're actually getting better response rates because these clients are particularly interested in providing feedback, you can gradually raise that up, unless you have some other standard that is being used to decide that threshold. You're not likely to get that kind of response rate from clients that are receiving services, particularly where there's not a long duration of service received.
Right, I think it
Yeah.
very much varies with the
It
program.
Right, I mean, I think that you're there and I think the response rate is probably going to be a pretty good indicator of how well the service provider is establishing partnership with the clients that are being served. But telling a program that they're in trouble in the evaluation if they don't hit 50%,
which is across the board a pretty common standard of an excellent response rate, seems like you're setting folks up to fail. When we're setting expectations that are not reasonable.
Especially when it's across the board. You know, I'd be very disappointed if we had less than 70%. However, when a family isn't connected with a program, and but it may not be designed to be, it may just be something else. And so I agree that if you put it across the board, that's problematic.
Are there any other thoughts on that, that it's too high at 70%? I've seen it be that high or higher at the previous Children's Services Council. We actually had our bar at 8. So I moved it a little bit lower from that. But
I think
typically,
we
we
talk
don't
about for
do-
that coalition, because we actually have done surveys with them right now, and then a lot of the respondents that are being asked to complete the survey, the response rates for some of their clients is 6-7%. With multiple attempts to reach out to families that have been served by the Early Learning Coalition. So I think that it really depends on the client and program that they're suggesting, and the likelihood that they're going to respond to any survey.
And another thing that we found when we negotiating contracts with our providers, it's a discussion. Those performance measures, we don't just add them to the contract without having a very lengthy conversation about the performance measure, what we're thinking, what they've seen in their programs. A lot of what ends up in the contract is really an agreement based on what they've seen in the past. So there is some discussion, and I agree with both. I've seen programs that have very high return of surveys, and I've seen some very low, especially in terms of health field, where no one's responded to the survey through the Medicaid program. And I think that has a lot to do with just kind of the frustration with families and getting feedback, that sort of thing. But so we have a discussion with our contractors before that line of decision.
Yeah, well, I would just say that we need to be cautious, certainly, because I know when you're sitting on the edge of your seat trying to say yes to anything that's gonna get you that funding, we don't want to encourage a big turnout. I know that, you know, marketing says if you get 5%, that's great.
Yeah, I think typically in these type of programs, I've seen it be high. Like if we're doing a survey about how much I like my service from Krispy Kreme this morning, yeah, they're gonna get a 3% participation rate, or, you know, those public surveys, or, you know, retail stores. Because typically how we do these surveys is it's through a trusted person and that gives out the link or hands out the survey. And I've seen it be high, typically been pretty high for this. But as Christy said, it really depends on the contract. And yes, those ELT surveys, because they come from a system, it's not handed, if it was handed to them by their childcare teacher, they would probably get a lot higher rate. But I think those are things that we want to work, because I definitely want to see, you know, every voice represented, and that we're.
I think it's important to share strategies that would increase survey completion rates, right? So they talk to folks about when to deliver the survey, the formats to use, so that we do get high response rates, because I think we all agree that's a goal. I think it's important if you're going to set a standard that you need to have some evidence and justification for setting that standard. And so that it has to be more than, you know, we've seen it work this way with other programs. I don't think we've got to be able to go to national standards or some national, you know, recommendation related to establishing those kinds of thresholds. Otherwise, we just set ourselves up.
Well, it's more aspirational than it's like a carrot rather than the stick, right?
I think we should say our goal is this, or you could just say our goal is to have as high response rate as possible, right? We want to hear from every client who's received services. Here strategies you can use to increase those response rates.
How many questions are normally posted?
It would depend on the program, but we do try to keep it short. Like, we haven't done one that's been longer than a page to date, you know, but you know, it's.
There was, and I don't know if it's in any of this, but on a business aspect, which is where I see kind of sort of you had a dramatic increase in, participation of a post, survey if you limited it to no more than 5 questions. And you let the person know, we have a quick 5-question, survey for you to please complete so that we can continue to provide services. You know, it's saying at night that you keep it 5 and under, your completion rate is skyrocket. Absolutely skyrocket.
I think our summer survey was 5 or 6 questions. There's the one who done was really appreciated.
It's 5 and under, let them know, you know, hey, I have a 4 question, I have a 5, no more than 5.
Are they collecting these anonymously or are they actually tagging them to their?
At this point,
ID.
it's anonymous, but in the future, I could see wanting to do maybe a pre-post or other ones that might not be. And then specific programs, sometimes they, in their own model, they post a survey that has pre-post or that they've identified or is just attached to their national model. So there's a variety, but none of them are extremely long or, I think so for the sake of time, for this one, I definitely heard this, for the last point, I will revise that bullet to, that we have a goal of 70% rather than saying, you know, and then, I could take out the area of improvement, but that said that is their goal of 70% or higher. And then, as far as, the opt-out, we kind of talked about that, you know, that they could be served by the program, but you know, wouldn't go to count towards the children's trust. So I can make those 2 edits, and I will bring that back. The last recap one that we had, because I want to get up to today's topic, was data sharing. We talked about what we would put in there for data, what we put in our policy for data sharing, that we would ensure that we have a clear purpose and intention for any external data sharing. That we would minimize any risk through implementing appropriate data security safeguards. Any research or evaluation performed by third parties using trust data would be conducted with de-identified data. And if there is an interest in linking trust data with external data set to examine the program or system impacts, that analysis would be done by the trust, and the amount of identified information would released would be minimal required to become that eventually use done so using that. Discussion on this, or is this is what I've heard. This is in the last meeting regarding what our thoughts were as a group on the data sharing piece. That 2 thumbs up. What happened?
No, it's, I don't know, compliment here, but
Oh, you.
BRCC, yes. I think it can be about fun, yeah. BRCC, yes. The past pages of-
Yes, that will be, yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, 2 out of 3, we'll come back with the other one. So the topic for today is how do we secure information? I reached out and spoke with Fred a little bit more and kind of share kind of what my thoughts were this, what my experiences with what practices have been in other organizations I've worked at and just general best practices. I think the main thing is, and then with the article you shared about the Amazon employee and then the school related data breach, they both really They kind of sat on the software and IT vendor that there were issues with how they were not implementing their procedures as should be. So I think for this one, just recognizing that there's multiple players in data security, there's the trusted its staff, there's the funded providers that we would want to place some language in our policy regarding how both us trust staff and the funding providers are operating in relationship together. But we also got to look at our software and IT vendors because they have a big role in ensuring the system is secure and that it's operating in line with the best practices. Look at that, you just think you want to jump in? Okay, so data security system requirement. The one recommendation I think has come up in our past meeting is that the data should be encrypted while at rest or in transit, and that means that that if it is accessed, that it's scrambled, people couldn't tell what it is anyway. If it was received, that access to the system would require and I'm talking about a phantom data system that we quite don't have, but I am in the process of exploring several different data systems for our organization where we could look at participants that we could have as our infrastructure for looking at who we're serving, how much we're serving, all those data, what's that we talked about before. That would require a strong password, including the different cases, numbers, symbols. They say the best practice is a minimum of 12 characters. I read most recently that passwords are changed every 90 days. So if you have a password, you'll get prompted to create a new one every 90 days. And now multi-factor authentication is also another safeguard where when you try to log in, it will then want to push push to your phone to validate, hey, somebody's trying to log into your computer, is it you? And you'll validate that. So that can be done now with the cell phone or email verification codes. I think most people are, is anybody not familiar? Has anybody not done that in this? I guess, and then for the system, to have an audit trail so we could see who logged in at what time and what records they accessed. You see, I got 2 thumbs up. Are there any concerns about having these system requirements being part of?
No, the only other one I would say on there is how you deactivate accounts, because
Yes,
that is a huge issue. People have, until they're prompted the next time, or even while you have an an audit trail there, somebody can still be just sucking out all sorts of data until they're, stopped.
and that's a very good point. And maybe I should go over the next 3 slides before I take more, because I did include that, and I guess
I apologize.
No, that was a good point, because that is something I agree with you. That should be also, okay, so this next is system access. So the system would be configured to each user specific role. If I'm with project build, I'm only going to be able to see project build provision. And if I'm with ACEs in motion, I'm only going to be able to see ACEs in motion. Kids, I won't be able to see everybody in the system, just who's relevant and the data relevant to my specific job. All data system users would complete a user agreement, which would have sort of what their what best practices are. Don't I think using regular email to share information is a no-no. There's keeping your password, don't stick it right to your laptop, like things like that. That will be reminders about how to use the system, how to protect information will be part of the user agreement. And those, obviously we want to train users on how to use the system. Providers will report or terminate staff's data system access immediately upon separation from employment. Yeah, this is a big problem that happens is sometimes staff will leave the organization and they won't be deactivated as quickly as need be. So that would definitely be something that we would want to be part of the provider contract that is happening. And if they are not doing it themselves, they're notifying CTAC or possibly even both. Data devices used for data system access must have a password. So in addition to the software system having a password, the device would also want to have a password too. And providers would report any device theft or account compromise to CTAC. And then the last one related to this, and then we could jump into what maybe is missing or what you think maybe could use revision or changes is other system security settings would be timeout after 15 minutes of inactivity. If you walk away, eventually usually people's computers will lock, but should they have a setting where their computers don't lock after so many minutes of inactivity that the data system will also time out. I mentioned this in previous slides, sort of redundant, but that password would expire in 90 days after 3 failed login attempts, you get locked out. So these would be all things we would want to specify to our software vendor. Again, that we want to implement strong passwords and that users that haven't logged in 40 days. This one tends to be burdensome sometimes, but that their account would be automatically suspended for inactivity, because if they're not logging in, usually that sometimes has been a fail-safe for in the instance where folks that don't need the data, don't need to access the data, or maybe have left the agency and somebody just forgot. That would be another safeguard for that. And then again, if there would be a data system user agreement at initial login, and then every year as a reminder of how to keep information secure, what to do, what not to do, things like that. And those are kind of what we wanted to put forth as good security suggestions for both the system, what providers would do, how CTAC could help support keeping the information protected. So I will open it up.
So internally, at the trust and the trust that you all will be able to view when we have individuals participating in multiple programs, but the contractors won't be able to see any relationship of the child they're serving with any of the other programs they're serving.
I think how there's, and we don't, this is again a phantom data system that we don't have. I would want to be able to have at some level that they can't add people that are already in the system. So like maybe they would be able to look up the CO, so they don't create multiple records. But other than that, what services and what programs they're able to, I think that would be locked down based on that.
Yeah, I did hear when you were saying, this program is only gonna see their data and the like, and I just wanted to make sure that even while they're only seeing the data they're putting in, they can't, somehow get to other areas that this child is involved in.
Yeah, they would only have rights to maybe view that the person exists in the system, but they wouldn't be able to see where they exist, why they exist, just so they don't add duplicate records. But I think that's how I've seen other systems set up so they don't duplicate the same child, but they can't see anything that they haven't provided permission for them to see. Which comes to question what if, if they would want for referral at some point, but I don't think we've gotten there yet. Yeah.
I'm thinking about and I love the information you don't have any questions for me reference to that. Except that, there are some programs that will only be summer programs. And so after they will probably come back and get reactivated every year.
Yeah.
For 40 days, they're going to stop using that after maybe the end of the
Yep,
program.
and then the next year they would have to reactivate.
They're just, that would be CTAC work basically to reactivate them, but that would still to make sure that the end still has that fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that is something that I think out of all the recommendations up there, that was the one that was, because sometimes people would only log in, like, especially like when they do their whole only every quarter when they needed to do their reports and like, wow, it's an actively different place we have to make where we have to do that. But it's also been helpful in the second place. I mean, it's really, I'm looking to hear from folks if that's something that.
If someone's gonna put on their calendar every first, they're gonna go over and just talk. Well, I mean, I think it's this, yeah, I mean, the point of the stat. If the report is due on the 30th, I would expect that you guys are gonna get a lot of calls on the 29th and 30th. As long as you guys can, like, make it a donut day or laugh about it. I think it's protectful and just annoying for the staff here. But yes.
That was what I perceived as a lot of these things people would perceive as sort of a hassle, for, or things a little bit harder, but. I mean, I think it's sort of protecting information's greater, the greater good, to make sure that nobody can just get in and do whatever. Is there anything listed that concerned anybody or anything that I didn't left out of here that people would want to see in addition?
Look at that. Like, short meetings for that.
Yeah, I didn't know if it would be, a longer or shorter,
The only thing that might be nice would be, and I think that would be the audit, maybe automated alerts. So that at the next count there. So that there's enough, not only is the person locked out. Let's say, for example, after so many bad passwords, but that someone in CCAC is anywhere. If there's that,
like a better intrusion.
yeah, or if you have someone that can access more than X amount of records. If there's an alert, then. And then maybe it was good, but. It's good to be proactive.
I'll also share something that I'm not an expert in, but this is one I recently learned about. Multi-factor authentication. Like I knew before you could do it like, save my device. Like it's your, so I know it's on my phone, but you can also do that specific to networks. So you can have, say what Alachua County just did, right, was we got plenty of emails from our IR team, information resources team, but they have it now where if you log into like an SBAC website outside of your school or district network, that will trigger the multi-factor authentication. So you could also do something where the multi-factor was, if you're at the organization or on a CTAC network, then it won't prompt MFA, but if you are, then it will trigger that. I don't know if that helps her, but that's just like I recently learned.
So are you saying that you think multi-factor would only be like when you're on a different device or a different network, or do you think? This is what I put forward is that anytime you log in, or, I would say maybe like if it's on the same day, you already, you logged in 15 minutes ago and you logged in again, maybe that second time, it doesn't make you do it, but.
I'm a big fan of MFA all day, every day. And I think the future that you're gonna see in password where it's all multi-factor or the single factor approach. So I would say that it's convenient, right? With that, but I mean, but then it's a wide. It just changes my attack method. So I mean, I do like multi-factors, and I mean, that's an opinion. Not everyone's gonna die.
Also that by no means an expert at it,
Yeah.
I was trusted. But I was on this.
How many are not needed? I hate it when I leave my car, my phone down in my car.
Yes.
And I love it. There's, yeah, I mean, that one makes it.
You want us to call or text that phone?
Right, and then I have to leave a change it so that it's by the office phone, yeah, but. I'll probably get that number listed in, so.
Bonnie, there is, the possibility it could be that initial validation that lasts a period of time, or is it 12 hours in DCF? You have to verify every 12 hours to get into the system. It's a dual verification system. And I'm like you, everything is dual verification, even if I'm sitting in my home. So
Yeah.
just for safety's sake, if we are truly trying to be secure in the data, that might be, it is a window of time that verification is good, perhaps the pre-noon, post-noon. You have to verify a second time after 12 noon. And
You should
at
be
least
able,
it affords that additional security.
you should be able to set a threshold, I assume, based on the phantom software, on the type of resource. So if I'm entering in data, it might be that 12-hour period is good, but if I'm accessing data every time I have to log on, if I have to re-log on, the risk potential of taking data versus giving that. Might have different thresholds. Based on the risk matrix.
So maybe within a certain time frame, like every, if they log in, to log in again. And within a certain time frame, like what, 12 hours is what your organization
It
does?
is 12 hours for DCF.
And I don't think we did a roll call. Do we have to do a roll call?
While someone's keeping track.
Okay.
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 I have one question about this, is as you guys look at the products, are you also looking for different security certifications, such as if it's a compliant organization, it's recently going through a FISMA audit, that they're also, looking to NIST standards that are routinely incorporated as when you want folks that have been through multiple security audits. And to make sure that they are also, you mentioned at the top of this discussion, that when there have been data breaches, it's been software firm or the company that's managing the software, not necessarily personnel or the organization to drop the ball. And so I think we want to have some assurances that they are routinely doing the audit procedures in place within with their work to make sure that whatever product you're purchasing is actually secure the way it's sold to you.
Okay, so to reiterate, to see that the vendor goes through routine security audits.
We had discussed, I think, third-party audits.
Yeah, third party.
Certification.
Possibly also ask about their cybersecurity insurance.
Yeah.
Because I know that's why we're having to do MFA, is because it's now a requirement, like we have to pay a lot extra for our cybersecurity insurance if we don't take mitigation steps like multi-factor authentication. So they probably have like a checklist of, to your point.
Yeah, you probably want to. The insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My understanding is we have our insurance through the county because we're under their IT infrastructure. So we do have that. So to add to our data security recommendations, we want to see the vendor has a third-party security audit, or what is there a specific name for the certification, or?
No, you just don't want them to sort of, yeah,
Certified.
I mean, you don't.
Yeah, that their security audit is certified by a third party.
Well, there's some certifications like that. Credit card data, so. It's PCI or anything like that, but then there's third-party audits of just them following their own procedures and things like that, as well as standard certifications for data center security and, it's all around. Things. I mean, there's so many certifications that hopefully they can keep up with them, but standard, I think we started in like best practices and routine best practices and verifications of being.
One of the vendors I spoke with, in my exploration was like, yeah, we have a third party audit us, they try to actively hack into our systems, we even give them passwords to see if they would be successful. Yeah, so I think that's a great thing to also put in there, that we want to see that the organization that we go with as our software vendor doesn't make sure that their system is locked down, right? So I think it's great to add that third parties. And is there a frequency, is it annual, is there a standard in the field for how often security audits happen? Is it once every 3 years? Like,
It's still kind of wild, but some
okay.
people be yearly, some of them are once. And
Okay.
I like
Mm,
yearly to biannual.
yeah, because I don't want to eliminate a good vendor because they, do it once every 3 years or. But still at the same time, we want to see that one's done on a frequent basis, that it wasn't just done once 10 years ago. Those are very different, ever evolving. Okay.
I mean, there's costs that are passed on.
Yes, that's true, that's true. Checking in with you, Lauren, anything here from you? On thoughts on how this would work out, or additional thoughts on what we've talked about?
No, that all sounds good. Data security is honestly not my area of expertise.
Okay, so we're right at the end. At the close point, we are at our next meeting, we'll be talking about sharing results, like how are we, because I think, we collect information is good, we want to be able to then take it and communicate it back out, to use it for all those great purposes of improving the quality, figuring out ways and strategizing to get better outcomes for children, and even really trying to connect with other partners and kind of share what we're doing and what's happening, who we're serving, and then and so how do we, and even with our parents and our so they can see how their programs are doing, and so I think that's an important part of the whole data management and collection process, is how information is going back out into the world. So that will be our next topic, and then looking forward to that, because that's something I is a frustration for me. Sometimes organizations collect a lot of data and don't carry it back out. So I think that will be good to get some of our team's input on that. We'll also at that point be very close to having all the sections that we want in there. So I'm thinking for the next time, I want to have sort of all that we've talked about. And as I've been, synthesizing our conversations and discussions, kind of have everything in there and have people's eyes on what's missing at this point, because our August meeting will basically be all about that. What in the policy, is there still something glaring that's missing that needs to be added? Do we really feel good about everything that's in there? Because I want everybody to feel good about what we're putting forward, and that it will be a good policy for organization where we're able to leverage information, collect all good information, and be able to learn from it. And so that will be the August meeting. And then we have an official date for the board meeting, will be September 26th, where we'll recommend share the final recommendations. So with that, we can I don't know if we have anybody that online or in person that wants to make a public comment, but now is the time for it. Okay, No, it's just Lauren and the children's trust. Any additional public comments for me?
You guys are on good important stuff.
Okay. All right, well, with that, I think that is all we have for today. We are adjourned. With 10 minutes to spare.
Well,